4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio. Live from the heart of the downtown east side, it's Talk Recovery Radio with Giuseppe Ganci and Darren Gaylor on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. From the streets to the studio, bringing you addiction recovery stories from real people with lived experience and real experts on today's issues. Tune in live every Thursday, noon to 1. Powered by New West Recovery. Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio.
And good afternoon, Vancouver. Hello, hello, hello. This is Giuseppe Ganci, and I'm here with a full house talking recovery. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio on Vancouver Co-op Radio. Special shout out to Vancouver Co-op Radio for giving us an hour to talk about recovery. If you're watching us on Facebook, awesome. If you're watching us on one of our restream devices, YouTube, click subscribe and like, and you can follow us on all your favorite restreams. Usually I'm on air with Darren. Darren, unfortunately, isn't able to make it today. Darren's having a rough month. He just got back from England. His partner's father passed away, so grandpa, and today his grandfather just passed away earlier today, so he's having a rough go at it. So prayers and thoughts are out there for Darren, and wishing you the best, and to your family. Having two losses in less than a couple of weeks is hard on anybody, especially with I don't know if you know Darren's story. He's got two awesome little boys, and so their grandpas are no longer with them. So shout out to Darren and the whole family, to the Gaylor family as well. So, but we got some conversation about recovery and what is happening. Darren and I usually have a banter back and forth, and lots of hot topics out there. Yesterday, for those of you that follow addiction recovery news, lots of conversations about safe supply came out yesterday, and new committees, and it's just a war out there. We might touch a little bit on that as we get into the show, but here we are talking with mothers with kids who are in a journey of recovery. I know most of their kids. Actually, I know all of their kids. And let's just say it wasn't, hey, mom, I want to get clean today. So this is as wonderful as it is to talk with moms with their kids in recovery. There's a lot of frustrations and sadness and grief and loss and everything that comes along with addiction. So, today we're going to be talking with these wonderful moms who have started an organization or are part of an organization called the Recovery Gnome Project. And then later on, we'll be talking about some activities that the Recovery Gnome Project does. And so we'll get more information about that. But we wanted to start the show off. First, we'll get everybody to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into a bit of some personal stories with these awesome moms. And you know what? I'm going to start with Chris. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much for having us. Really exciting.
Yeah, so we'll just go through the room first and just hey, my name is, and if you're okay to say I got a son and what's going on there. So Chris, we'll start with you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris. I have a son who is 3.5 years clean now, and just happy and grateful to be a family in recovery. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Kathleen.
Hi, I have two sons in recovery, one coming up to 2 years and the other one at about 5 months.
And you must have an awesome story. 2 kids in recovery. Yes. And Carrie Ann.
Hey there, I'm Carrie Ann. I have 2 sons. One's 25 in recovery and the other is 23 and not.
Awesome. Thanks, Carrie Ann. And hello, Sandra.
Hello, thank you for having us on the show. So yeah, I have a son and he is nearly 4 years in recovery.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandra. And last but not least, we've got Leanne. Hi, Leanne.
Hi, and again, thank you for having us. I have a son who is in recovery. He is 63 days clean, And our story is about having been 2.5 years clean and coming out of a relapse.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show. Relapse definitely a part of people's recovery journey. So, Chris, thanks for helping put this together. We hear a lot uh, from moms whose kids are gone too soon. That is, the conversation that really gets the media's attention and so forth, and rightfully so. Sometimes we don't hear a lot about the other side of the story, and we know how many people are dying every day, but we don't know how many people are recovering every day. And when COVID was happening, we knew how many people were dying and recovering. Does that bother you that you see, in the news, that where's my son represented in this whole crisis that we're having when it comes to overdoses?
Yeah, it's very, very true. I think it's important today more than ever when we have the toll, the mental health toll, and that the pandemic is taking on people is quite amazing, and we're not going to be seeing the fallout for all of that for years from now. But I think our message is one of hope, and now more than ever, we need that message of hope so that people can see that there is a possibility, that there are some alternatives, that we can, with hope, we can try to end the stigma of addiction and have a nice normal conversation about what are some options. And luckily for us, that recovery was a huge option for us, and it's worked for us, and we would just love to share that.
So I know a bit of everyone's stories here, and so you talked about options, and I'll just go back to Chris one more time. Chris, so when you say recovery was an option, why was recovery an option? And was it just my son needed help and recovery was right there waiting for him? How did you find recovery? How did this start for you?
Well, no, it was not. It was not provided to me the way you would think it would be. We, luckily for me, I mean, luckily or unluckily, depending how you look at it, I look at it as luckily. I come from a family where addiction has been just part of our history, so I knew that recovery was an option. But having said that, when we went to go look and find resources, we weren't really given any that suggested that recovery was the way to go. It was more, let's get you on some opioid replacement therapy. Let's send you to a clinic where you come once a week, and good luck. Yeah,
That's it.
That's it. That's it.
No one told you, hey, your son could possibly stop using, or no one told you your son. So did anybody else have similar experiences to that? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I and I'd say it's the most frustrating point ever as a mom. And I think one of the things that we have is privilege. There wasn't really anything open. Luckily, I had a friend that pointed me towards the treatment place that my son went to, but otherwise, I'd have had no idea. The medical system did not provide any direction at all. So it was just through luck and really her really directing me, and then us having the ability to be able to pay for it. I mean, I think we have to be honest. And I do feel that this isn't available to everybody, and it should be. It's just it.
That's one of the things we talk about in our show a lot is equal access, and I think we've lost the everyone's fighting so much between the silos of care and who's better and who's got more science and who's got more research. But the ultimate realistic truth is when a mom's sitting there with their kid, using, unless there's an uncle or a family friend or the ability to pay for private health care, really the options of recovery are not given. And we've been shouting that from the mountaintops for a really long time. And your story is very common. It's just like, what's recovery? And it's unfortunate. And we hope politicians are listening to this show, and really it's like the full continuum of care really needs to be provided from the get-go, not depending on who and what your community capital is. So Carrie Ann, I've had the opportunity of hearing you share at a meeting, giving your son a cake and so forth, and you had said something that resonates for a really long time. I loved my son, but I didn't like my son, and something around that kind of conversation. And what was that about? What was it like when you finally realized it's like, yeah, my son needs help, and so forth?
No, Giuseppe, it was a long battle. And I know you also know my son, and till this day, he was called the other night prickly. He can still be that way. So imagine my prickly son in active addiction, and how prickly, if we want to call it, he might be then. So for 5 years, we're on this journey. He lived in our basement. I had no one to talk to, just nobody to have a conversation with. And I just had this unruly bear with, extreme highs, extreme lows, living in my basement. And he had turned into one of those, one of those kids I went to high school with, that I just did not like at all. Like, I didn't know how to deal with him. I thought, I can't believe I've raised my son like this. Like, I can't believe this is my son. So yeah, he was hard to live with. It was, hard for us knowing what was happening in our basement. Embarrassing, to say the least. But fortunate for us, we were able to send him to a residential treatment center. He got help and he changed. I can honestly say I like the person he's become. He's, he is the son I wanted. He is who I want him to be.
And just saying that, the because a lot of moms that haven't had an opportunity to participate in some type of recovery journey, like, they would never say they don't like their son. I mean, there's this thing of protection, and I don't like the word codependency. We've done shows on that. It's just the idea, like, this is keeping up with the Joneses, and whatever that scenario is in life. But letting go and letting your son try to do this and not on his own is really hard for moms. And a lot of times, and we'll get into what kind of supports all of you received, but a lot of times, and I don't answer the phone really anymore, but when I used to answer the phones here where I work, you would say, well, what are you doing for yourself? And the mom would be like, well, what do you mean? It's my son that's the problem. It's like, well, this is going to take a couple months. But before we get into like what supports moms did, Kathleen, you have 2 kids, in a recovery journey. And so I got to ask, how did you feel when you came to the realization that, I don't know if you have any other kids, but 2 of my kids have substance use disorder? Did you take any of that on? Like, what did I do wrong?
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it resonates with me when we talk about the stigma of addiction. There's also the stigma of having a child in addiction, because I think it is honestly viewed, although it is a medical condition, it is viewed somehow as a moral failing. And I was just talking to a mom yesterday, and I was just encouraging her, you need to look at your child, and then you need to look at the addiction. And it's not a moral failing. It is a medical condition, and there is help. But for sure, as a parent, I definitely turtled. I felt very isolated. It was my younger son who, it went very, very quickly from just experimenting to not going to school, using every day. And that's kind of when we realized, and he just, like Carrie Ann said, your son kind of becomes unrecognizable to the son that you brought up. And so we recognized that he needed help. And like Sandra said, we were able to get him into a residential treatment center. We didn't even know that there was such a thing as a funded bed in this residential treatment center. And I really feel the weight of how it must feel when you literally just cannot afford to get your son help, when I think it is recognized that it's better to act early. I do remember the day that my younger son went and my older son said, "Don't start paying attention to me now." And we hadn't been paying any attention to him. And I don't think his problem was as full blown. And then the pandemic hit, and then he was isolated, and one thing led to another. I do think we're going to see many, many more people suffering from addiction as the weight of the isolation of the pandemic hits. So yes, I definitely took it on. I isolated myself from my friends. I did feel ashamed. And this coming together on talk radio and coming together in this run just represents such a journey from me crying alone in my bathroom to me proudly wearing a t-shirt and saying, yeah, come and talk to me because I've been through some stuff. And if I can help you, I'm here. So
that's beautiful.
yeah.
That's what it's all about, is helping others and so forth. You talked about stigma there for a couple of minutes, and the stigma of addiction and the stigma of having a son in addiction, and then there's also the stigma of recovery. It's like, I don't want people to know my kids are even in recovery, and that's a real thing where there's that process of change to recovering out loud. It doesn't, like, so many people, not only do they don't want people to know that they used, but now they don't want people to know that they're in recovery, because what are people going to think? They're going to think that I used and now I'm in recovery. When it's like when you recover from cancer, it's a huge milestone. But when you recover from addiction, it's there's still that sense, and a lot of people get confused about anonymity and decide to like hide the fact that they're in recovery. And that's why we do Recovery Day, which is the picture behind us. 15 years ago you couldn't do that, and now you can, because so many advocates have said, hey, it's okay to be clean and sober and to share your story, and you're not breaking anonymity and so forth. And because of that, we can do a radio show like this where moms can come on and say, hey, if you got this problem, we can help, and it helped us, and so forth. So Leanne, I think you have the son with the, I wouldn't say least amount of clean time, but just newer. Obviously there was some recovery beforehand and so forth. So let's talk about relapse. So when you found out that there was a relapse in your family, how did you feel, and what did you do?
Oh, it's having 2.5 years of clean time with my son, and I'm in Toronto. The relapse was devastating, not only for my son, but for myself and our family. And my experience with the relapse is it felt worse than the actual the addiction, and making the decision to go into a residential rehab facility. Because I remember when I brought my son to the rehab facility the first time, and I remember walking out and walking down the street and crying, relief, but also that fear of, what if this doesn't work? And then when you have the relapse, it is, what now? And it was terrifying. Still is.
For those of us that follow social media and so forth, everyone has a platform now. And this goes to you, Leanne, and then maybe some other mothers. Did you feel a sense of, when people relapse or when things don't go perfect, it's the treatment center's fault, it's the recovery pathway's fault, the 12 steps don't work, treatment doesn't work, the only thing that works is harm reduction, and there's no science? Did you get that? Like, yeah. Okay, so yeah. Why didn't you go? So help me understand from a mother's perspective, because I know there's a lot of moms out there, that it's happened. I've seen the posts and I've seen the tweets and so forth. And so how did you go from like, hey, this isn't the treatment center's fault and so forth? Not to say all programs are great, but how did you go from a place of no more blaming?
Oh, it wasn't even on my radar. It
Okay.
was, okay, let's back up here. Let's examine what, where did we go off the path? And it was because how I contributed to it is I didn't understand the recovery process. I thought that you went to a treatment center, you got clean, you did the program, my son worked the program. I didn't understand my role in my recovery. Somebody said, what's your recovery? I'm like, my recovery? I'm not,
Yeah.
like, I'm
That
really everything moving forward. I got no
that's a,
problem.
yeah. What are you talking about me for?
Good.
Yeah. So, with that point, what does that mean? So your kids went to rehab, but what did you all have to do?
Right.
Who
Yeah.
wants to go first? We'll start with Chris again.
Oh, wow. Boy, did I have a lot of work to do. And yes, I was exactly like, what do you mean I need to work on myself? I'm perfect, right? I'm the one that fixes everything. I've got this. I'm in control of everything. To be quite honest. So when my kid went into his treatment center, I started going to what worked for me. I started going to Nar-Anon meetings, and I have to be quite honest. While I walked the walk and did the talk, whatever the expression is, I didn't fully believe. I kept on going to these meetings thinking that I'm going to learn different ways of how to help fix my child, how to fix him when he comes out of treatment, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't until probably like 5 months later, I'm slow on the uptick there, that I finally realized that, you know what, really the one person who needs to change is myself. And yes, I as I mentioned, I did the meetings. The treatment center that my kid went to also had a family group. It was different prior to Zoom because we didn't get to meet so many people. And now that it's on Zoom, it's fantastic because there's just so many people you can meet and so many different opportunities to get supports. So I had to make the difficult decision to start reaching out to people and build my own support network. And I know that the other day you had someone on the radio and she called it stinking thinking, the stinking
Yeah.
thinking. And
Yeah.
I absolutely love that terminology because even to this day, 3.5 years later, I still have to call out and reach out to my supports because that stinking thinking comes right back in. I can't trust myself to make good decisions sometimes because while my son's drug of choice was something else, my drug of choice has been my son, and I can relapse easily back into the old patterns.
Mm-hmm. It's such a nice awareness piece to be able to understand, what just happened. Because I mean, that's another piece, Kathleen, where you're kind of like, what the heck is going on with this family, from the husband to the kids to Christmas dinner? Like, let's just eat the damn turkey, if you eat meat. So you and your husband, with two sons, you're now entering these individuals into treatment, and now it's your turn to do some work on yourself and so forth. And from the sounds of it, it sounds like everybody was ready to embrace this, but there's a process in that. And what do you say to parents that are out there right now whose sons are using and so forth, and are desperately trying to get them help? So what do you say to them?
Oh, I think it's something that does take a while to come to grips with. So I think, at least for us, it was education. So we did do a lot of reading. We met with counselor. We tried to describe the problem. We, tried to get some help from the school. And I can't say your regular high school's super duper helpful. Stigma lives in high schools for sure. But I think through that process, we could kind of understand maybe where some of it came from, what the family history, the trauma thing is very stressful as a parent, because there's the idea of that it needs to be like a big T trauma that underlies these kids from the suburbs who are getting themselves into all sorts of drugs. And sometimes it's the little T traumas. And I had to kind of, because, your mind goes to, did I let my son get touched in a hockey dressing room? Or you have somebody come to you and say, well, we did 6 o'clock dinners, and so we don't have that problem. And I wish I could say that isn't something somebody would say. So I think through more understanding about the new problem that faces families, which is just incredible diversity of drugs that are available everywhere, tainted drug supply available everywhere, super strong drugs that are available everywhere, lots of stress in our teenagers' lives. It's a new world. So through education, I think my husband and I were able to forgive ourselves a little bit. And then kind of once our son was in the residential treatment center, we just felt like this weight could come off of us. And coincidentally, it was right at the beginning of lockdown. And so I think it was good in a way because we just leaned on each other and kind of remembered, oh, this is why we're married. And yes, this is happening. And, why do I like you? And why do I like myself? And what did I used to do to bring myself joy? Because I think, like Chris said, I think when you do become you can easily become overly focused on your son. And I don't, most mothers, it's just a natural protective instinct. But I think in the end, where that gets you is your kids feeling responsible for your moods. And they're already dealing with their own shame around their drug and alcohol use or other behaviors. And so it kind of turns into a bit of a vicious circle. So I think the path to healing for your loved one is always starting with yourself. So I think if you can take care of yourself and focus on your own life, your life purpose, your happiness, then that frees your loved one up to focus on themselves.
Very powerful piece. One of the other things too is, while you get well, and this is something I've seen with experience, is your kids realize, hey, the gig's up. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? So, it's because it always says you were powerless. And it's kind of like, I didn't know from my personal story, but then it's like, okay, now I get it. Like, I know what's going on here and so forth. So there's like, by you getting well, your kids, really can't play the and I hate to say this, but the addiction card is just like, yeah, I get it, you want $20. Like, I know what's going on. I know what's happening here. You can't pull it over me anymore, and so forth. There's also a piece of asking for help, so I wanted to ask Carrie Ann, so here you are, you're realizing what's going on in your household. For your story, was there a moment where you had to tell your mom, hey mom, like, this is happening? And or if you have sisters and brothers, how did you break it? Because that's a lot of times people just don't say anything. It's like, you go to rehab and let's not tell anybody. So did you have that scenario, or did you like get your family involved, and not just the family unit that lives in the 4 walls that your son lived in, but the extended family as well? How did you break that silence?
Oh boy, it took a while.
It did, eh?
It took a while. It's just that shame that comes with the addiction piece. Nobody else in my family has an addiction. We don't often talk about things that trouble us. We only seem to celebrate all the good times. And talking about addiction. And my sister has 2 boys as well, both very successful. One's been drafted in the NHL, and I have 2 boys, and one was addicted to drugs. So I was lucky in the sense that my son came to the realization one day, came upstairs and said, Mom, I think I need some help. So of course we didn't know what was out there. I had no idea what help looked like, or that he could be helped, other than, why can't he just quit, which obviously he couldn't. So we made a few calls, and he talked to a counselor and showed him some options for treatment. And we chose the one he went to. And I don't actually think it was until about a month later that I told my mom. Then a few weeks after that, I told my sister. A few weeks after that, I told my dad. And then I finally told my brother. So it did take a long time before we told anybody.
What were their reactions?
There was a lot of sadness. There was a lot of, why didn't you tell us sooner? And then there was that, I'm so glad you are getting help for him. I'm so glad you found something, and, we hope he does well. And, I'm just, they were sorry that they didn't know, sorry that we were in this situation, and hoping for the best.
It's amazing, Sandra. It's 2022. 20,000 Canadians 20,000 plus Canadians have died of overdoses in the last 5 years since the crisis has kind of been starting. That doesn't include alcohol, that doesn't include cigarettes, that doesn't include, other issues that have to do with drugs. That's just simply overdoses. So who knows what the numbers are? And we still don't have a public recovery campaign. We have a naloxone campaign. We have all these, but like, here's Carrie Ann, who probably has a TV and probably reads the paper and probably has social media, is not being given messaging that these are the options, all of the options. And here you are, needing to rely on a friend of a friend. So the concept of that, how that creates advocacy for me, and it sounds like it creates some for this group of moms as well. Before we get into the recovery gnome conversation, though, how would being a mom with a kid in recovery and having done some recovery therapy yourself, if you want to call it that, how does it feel to see the messaging that you do see online? Like yesterday, there was a huge report. Basically, nowhere in the report does it really talk about we need to do this recovery campaign to let people know that there's, and I don't mean just say no campaigns. I mean an educational campaign for people like Carrie Ann and Kathleen and yourself. This is what recovery is. How does that, what messages are you seeing, and how does that make you feel?
I think it's frustration. It's almost like our stories have so much hope and inspire, but people don't want to hear that. It's almost like they want to go to the medical way, or to the stigma of, these people, like we were saying, we've all got such strong shame and stigma in terms of being mums with sons in addiction, that it's just not good news, I think. And I think that's one of the things that I think we're facing. It's just really hard. People are shocked. I'm still, surprised how many people, it's just that initial, people don't want to talk about this. And we keep on saying, why not? This is, like you said, it's 2022, but people only want to talk about it in terms of putting a band-aid and getting it out the way so we can have the, other stories. So it is so frustrating. And, I'm not embarrassed. I'm
That's a
just
key
living.
point.
I'm living, and I know my son is not graduating from some highfalutin university, but he's done the best a most amazing schooling that anybody could ask for. And when you talk to him, he just gives me and so much hope. And part of my recovery was him helping me, like it did a switch. He said, "Mom, you need to start recovering yourself." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And then I realized, you know what? And I love the fact you said about codependency. I really do actually hate that word, because I think we are just so protecting. So I think there's just so much we need to change. Just and we're just such it feels like such a small group, but I think that's why the gnome and then the race, the run coming up, the run
Yeah.
walk is so important. The more we can put the messaging out there, because I know this is a small group of mums. It started small. They were just, you know, 3 of us initially. Now we're becoming an army of mums. So you know what? I think watch out world, you know, this is where I think it comes from the conversations, because that way it's one to one, and it's that people open up. It's like every time we sort of talk about the Recovery Gnome Project or the run, somebody's like, "Well, I have, I have, can I talk to you?"
Yeah.
Everybody has somebody who's in addiction.
Yeah, and you're all, some of you anyway have some shirts on, but we can't see if you can all like back up a bit so your camera can see it. So we've got the Recovery Gnome Project, and so this started off a while ago with some moms in recovery and a joint venture of a group of moms. And so what is the Recovery Gnome Project, and what's the point of it, and how do people get involved? Chris, you want to go with that?
No, I'm looking at Sandra. She's looking at me. I think it's almost 2.5 years ago, 2.5 years ago that we came up with the idea. And I think at that time we were so incredibly proud of where our kids had come from and where they were then. And we wanted to shout from the rooftops. We just wanted to make broad sweeping change. We thought, well, why aren't people talking about recovery? It's all around us. It's something to be celebrated, and that actually is how we came up with the gnomes symbol, which basically gnomes are the guardians of treasure, and for us, we really felt like recovery is the greatest treasure, and it needs to be nurtured and cared for and guarded. And so that was kind of our way of, the symbol was a way to kind of bring attention without, it's non-threatening. So we decided, okay, well, we're going to paint these little gnomes. We're going to put them all around. We're going to start having conversations, which we did. And I think what we've learned mostly from this is that over the last 2.5 years is that it's not so much placing the gnomes out. We do that because we want people to visualize that recovery is around and surrounds us everywhere. It's more, again, those going back to those individual conversations. And it's through those conversations that I kind of, my perspective on recovery and what a recovery journey is, and what it should look like has really changed. I was a little bit, I'll be honest, dogmatic in the beginning, and I had very particular views. And then I realized, well, who am I to say what one person's recovery looks like and what another person's recovery looks like? And let's see, you were asking, I'm sorry, I kind of got.
So so you have a website and a Facebook page. The website's Recovery Gnome. What's the website?
It's recoverygnomeproject.com. We have on Facebook Recovery Gnome Project, and then on Instagram too. So we are more than happy for people to send us postings of gnomes or their recovery inspiration, and we will post it and shout out loud, because like Chris said, it's one conversation at a time. And I think it's kind of, it's sort of interesting. Things have changed a lot over the last couple of years. And I think it was perfect for when we were in the pandemic, because, you know, people weren't leaving the house. But now we're ready to go out to the world. So I think that's why this run and the Recovery in Motion team is perfect. So we're no longer just going to be on social media. We're going to be out in the communities more.
It builds community. And the run that you're speaking about, BMO, is having an 8-kilometer run. What's the date of that again? It's on, pardon?
First.
May 1st. So it's a recovery team, and it's if you want to be on the team, it's called Recovery in Motion. You can be part of run if you're in the Vancouver area and you're listening to the show. You can be in our running clinics there on Sundays at 10 a.m. in New West. We're trying to get a team of about 100 people together. I think there's 50 people on it already. So that would be great. And it's not about the gnomes, and it's not about the running, and it's not about winning the marathon. I don't think I'd be able to anyway, but that's not the point of it. It's about having these conversations, having a purpose to get on a radio show and talk about it. And hopefully there's a mom out there listening that's, got 2 kids, or is like Carrie Ann, what is my family and my mom gonna think? And then you got Leanne with a son that's having relapse in his story. I mean, we've all had relapse in our story, so it's one of those opportunities to be like, oh, I'm not the only one, and so forth. Because a lot of times the conversation about addiction is so terrifying in the media, you kind of like don't want to look. Like, I'm not associating my family with this story, and sometimes we need to, and I don't want to use the word normalize, but your kid doesn't have to be homeless on the streets. He could be in your basement or going to school and all that kind of stuff and still have addiction issues. So you don't have to wait till somebody's 40 years old on the streets to help them. It's like Kathleen did, with the youth program. It's like getting kids help early. So this run, you're excited. So you're all gonna run
Or walk.
or walk? Okay.
Combination.
Combination. Okay, disclaimer. We've done the sun run as a team many times. We're not this year. We're gonna do the BMO one, and I got busted having a latte during the marathon. I was just like, I'm not a runner. I'm having a coffee. And somebody's like, hey, you're supposed to be running, and I'm like, I need a coffee. So I had a latte. Whatever. It's about getting down there and being part of, and doing the running clinics and making friends, and you're going to be with new people. I mean, I remember for going to these running clinics, and you have somebody that's literally 2 weeks in recovery. They just came from this chaos, and now they weren't running, other than running from places or to places, but they weren't running for a hobby. And like, this has become important.
I think it's, oh, I'm sorry, Giuseppe.
No, go
all
ahead.
about the shared experience. I mean, ultimately, we went from painting little gnomes individually to having painting parties. And it's not necessarily the gnomes, it's the act of sitting down and doing something with other people and sharing your stories and sharing your hope. And I think that carries over just right into Team Recovery in Motion. I wanted to just interject, as I already did, that this kind of sums up our whole mission, which is to celebrate recovery, inspire conversation, learning, and hope. We had sent out I had sent out an invitation to my next door neighbors to come and join our team. And she works for a big company. And really, when she called me up and said, oh, Chris, let's meet, I had these great ideas that, oh, good, I can get her company to sponsor us and all these big things. No, what she told me was that her son, her 13-year-old son, is going to have his bar mitzvah this summer, and that he needed to find a social project to work on. And he had been struggling. And when he saw my invitation to come run, he was struck. And he said, this is what I want to do my social project on. He and his mom are both signed up for the run, and he is going to be throwing his own run for his friends and for money. And then they're all going to donate it to a treatment center. So to me, that just sums it all up. We were able to celebrate recovery by sharing our stories, and that's being passed on. And it's just beautiful.
Because people don't know.
No.
And this helps people find out. Unfortunately, too many people are finding about recovery by accident, and by what you're all doing, you're making that accidental introduction to recovery happen a lot sooner for some people. And so I applaud you for doing that and speaking up. And it's like I respect and understand, like, this wasn't your life, when your kids were showing up to rehab. And so if you're watching and listening and you think, oh, I'm not like these women or like these moms, you are, and you can and will be. And so it needs a little bit of work, and needs a little bit of, asking for help, but you can be like these moms and so forth. And I gotta ask, where's the dads? And just had to ask, because I'm sure somebody's watching and being like, where's the dads? So anybody want to comment on that conversation? And was it harder for the dads, and so forth?
I would love to speak about this.
Okay.
And my husband's not in the country, so I can throw him under the bus. This was actually in family group, something that I often spoke about, and I found it very hard because my husband wasn't as involved. But what happened is he found his own way to recover, and his own way to create relationships with our son. So I think it was that realization that this journey is actually my journey. It's not his journey. So that for us, once I was kind of there, it kind of made sense. And honestly, he's done a lot of work, and their relationship is the best it's ever been. So yeah. So again, it's you cannot presume you know what other people need, which is kind of what I did initially. So
And
it's a good.
yeah, because I mean, now your kid's in rehab. Now it's like, honey, you have to do this too. And I can just imagine. Well, I'm not just imagine. I know some of those conversations, and everybody thinks, oh, now that the drug use has stopped, the family life is perfect, and that's not the case. And so you have to get to a place where it's like you just said, Sandra, it's your journey. It's not your kid's journey. It's not your husband's journey. It's your journey, and what your role in this family unit is. Yeah, caregiver and caretaker, but to what extent, and how do you do that in a healthy way is something that creates that recovery journey. Because there's that idea. It's like, we're not going to talk about your son's recovery journey. We're going to talk about yours. And people would rather take care of other people than themselves. I don't know why that is. I think we're all like that, but the gift is learning that you have to take care of yourself. So Leanne, I wanted to, before the show ends, because your son's back in treatment, because there's moms out there whose kids, go to rehab, relapse, go to rehab, relapse, go to rehab, relapse. And how do you keep the strength to still support for those moms out there whose kids either on the streets still, or has been to rehab, with that story?
Yeah, it's terrifying. And what I've learned through this relapse is the importance of having the support, whether it's through a parent group or Narnon or Al-Anon, but really it's doing the work, recognizing when your child is showing those behaviors of an addict versus when your child is just struggling through the normal course of getting through the day or the week. And what I've learned is through my recovery is that when those signs of that little gremlin addict is coming into play, that's no longer my son. And that's when the shield comes up and the boundaries come in, and you're not battling your son, you're battling the addiction. And that's really, for me, it's a mental game of knowing when to say no and step away. Right.
And step away. It's not like, hey, I said no, but stick around to see what happens after.
It's step away and put your, like, there's so much trust and faith that I have in the process that everything is going to work out, but you have to trust the process, and you have to be able to step away from it and pray that everything will be okay.
Everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
learning to say no and learning how to step away after you say no. Remember that. So Carrie Ann, you mentioned earlier you have a son in recovery and a son not in recovery. So I remember seeing this on, why is everybody with problems, get rewarded with, newspaper articles, and how about people that are just regular, getting a job, going to school? You don't see their life, in a profile. Where's their reward? So how, and this could be for the entire group here, how do you, the son that's using, and then in recovery there's cakes, there's meetings, there's groups, there's all this noise going around son A, and then you have another son who's just doing his thing, going to school, no noise. How do you give equal attention? And is there animosity that goes on between siblings? Oh, you pay so much attention to Morgan. So is that experience for you, to anybody else? And how do you deal with that to make sure both kids are feeling 100% of the support?
I always thought when my boys were younger and they said to me, well, now that we've said Morgan, and Morgan would say, Mom, you love Kenzie more. I can tell you love Kenzie more. And then, half an hour later, Kenzie would come to me and say, Mom, everything is about Morgan. You love him more. And I thought, you know what? This is good. They both think they're
Yeah.
each other is number one. So I love them equally. But, as you know, addiction really takes its toll on the whole family. So yes, for all those years and even during treatment, life was revolved around Morgan, his highs, his lows, whether he was going to show up for dinner or not, whether he was going to show up for 2 minutes and then leave, and what was he going to do. And then there's my other son who sat with us every night and helped with the dishes and listened and had a regular conversation with us. And sometimes I do feel guilty that you take those moments for granted. But on the other hand, my son Kenzie is very understanding and wanted nothing more than for his brother to get better. They're friends now. I can't say they've been that way their whole life. They're friends. Kansas is going to go down and they're going to go to a Canucks game on the weekend. But yeah, you can't take any moments for granted, big or small. You've got to appreciate them all. Even going to school and getting his plumbing ticket and working on his business course, and maybe not getting straight A's, but you do have to celebrate those moments and acknowledge that there's pride and value in normalcy as well. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy. No, it's not easy, but it's real. I mean, the people get Christmas and a birthday, and when you're in recovery, you get Christmas, a birthday, and your clean date birthday, and
That's
all
right.
that kind of stuff. So you get more cake. So, some of you have been involved with Recovery Gnome since beginning. Have any of you ever been asked to be part of a stakeholder group for the BC's overdose crisis and so forth, and asked, what's your story and what's your voice, so we can add some fixes to our policy? And if you have, like, what's happened at those meetings?
Ooh. Well, Sandra and I did participate in one, and it was really interesting. I think it was, Sandra, do you remember exactly what it was for?
Yeah, I'm blanking because we kind of did it and then I don't know what happened. So that's actually, COVID too, I think probably didn't help, but I think it was policy around BC mental health and substance use. So I think,
Okay.
so, but my apologies to
To
that.
whoever was on that committee, yeah. So did
Uh,
anything come out of it that you know of, or just kind of like, let's talk and see you later?
I think they just wanted to listen to different perspectives. And then we did, I know I think Carrie Ann and I were on another one. And this was they're opening up a treatment center somewhere, and they wanted our advice on what they had put together so far. And even my son was on that panel, and all of us just shook our heads because in the long run, it unfortunately was turning into a very, very small treatment center. It wasn't going to be in any kind of town. They didn't have supports for the family. It was co-ed. It was very interesting, and I hope and I wish them great success, because we need as many treatment centers as possible. I think earlier when we were talking about hope and hearing about when we're talking about the pandemic and everything and what we would want and how we can help other people, if we want people to suggest recovery as an option, we have to have that option available. Right now, if we go to the doctor and say, oh, I want my son to go into recovery, but there's nowhere to go. So while I feel like these stakeholder meetings are really, really important, it's still one of those things where we keep waiting for the big changes to happen.
And also, I think too, just to add to that, is healthcare is all about lived experience, or becoming about lived experience and patient focused research. But I don't see us being invited to any of that within mental health and addiction. And I think with the substance use, I know, well, myself, mental health was a big issue too, and that journey was equally as frustrating and complicated. So I'm happy to go on any table that they would like to hear me speak, because I think one of the beautiful things about us as a group is our boys, we're all boys, we're all fairly young. And I think this is the important part, is we need to be able to provide recovery to youth and to young adults, because that's where we know we're going to make the biggest influence. So
Well, hopefully, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Sheila Malcolmson, she's definitely has an ear on recovery. She came to our Recovery Pathways talks, that we just held, 3 of them, I think 2 weeks ago. So I think we just need to be louder. And thank you for raising your voice. And if you're listening to this show and you're wondering, what recovery is, I think they've done a pretty good job. Showcasing that recovery is a journey that's for the whole family, and it's possible, and people have the right to recover, and people have the right to challenge the status quo that somebody with a substance use disorder, there's nothing wrong with medications, but to just say, hey, you need to be on a safe supply for the rest of your life, which, I think a lot of people that do talk about safe supply say that's not the message. But when you talk to people like Dr. Daly and Dr. Sutherland, that's actually what they say in their talking notes, quote, to live a life, to be on meds for life. I mean, that's stigma. It's palliative care treatment can sometimes be given to a 17-year-old. We need to put all of our resources into this, and if medication's the way to go, that's great, but at least, like you said, Chris, let's make sure that recovery and a bed is available. Where I work, there's a wait list for months, and that shouldn't be. So thanks for being on the air, and thanks for including the New West recovery community in your run. So if you want to be part of the Recovery in Motion, Recovery Gnome Project BMO 8-kilometer run, right now they're looking for about 100 people. I think there's 50 people on the
No,
team.
it's even more.
We're
We
at
have about
130.
130. Well, way to go. 130. Well,
we're
120.
shooting for 200.
Okay, well, if you want to be part of the team, go to Recovery Gnome's Facebook page, go to Recovery Gnome's website. There's an email, connect with them. And if you want to do some running clinics, come to New West, and you can do some running clinics on Sundays at 10 a.m. Open to everybody. Anybody that wants to walk or run or stop by and have a latte, that's okay too. And we'll see you there, and really looking forward to it. And also, reminder, if you want to do a little recovery gnome and send the image, they'll share it for you and so forth. How many recovery gnomes do you think have been done so far?
Oh,
That's about 500 or more.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot.
oh, and we have the Girl Guides painting some for the run.
For the run
Oh,
too.
exciting, exciting.
Yeah.
You can learn more about it. Thank you, Carrie Ann, Kathleen, Sandra, Leanne, and Chris for sharing your story. Thank you
Giuseppe.
to your sons who allow, because, obviously we wanted to make sure they were okay with it because, it's a family journey. So thank you to them as well and for their courage for what they've done. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio on Vancouver Co-op Radio, and we're also restreamed on all your favorite devices, SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. You can go to talkrecoveryradio.com to find all of our restreams, and we'll see you next Thursday. Again, shout out to Darren, who couldn't be with us today. Family emergency, the passing away of his grandfather, and just a sad day for Darren. So our thoughts are out to him. And take care, everybody. See you at the run. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.